Open Market is sponsored by AdLib, the self-serve DSP solution making advertising easy. What do the world's largest demand-side platforms have in common? They're effective, but they require large annual contracts and spend minimums. With AdLib, growing agencies get a single platform that connects to every top global DSP with no contracts, no spend minimums, and G2's #1 ranked support. That means access to the entire universe of TV, digital out-of-home, audio, display, video, and native without a hassle and with no blind spots. It's incredibly easy to use, plus it can automate most of the work your team spends hours a day doing manually. Get the most powerful media buying technology without the barriers to entry. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com today.
So for the listeners, unfortunately, this is not a video pod. We need to change this because I say that all the time because listeners miss out on everything. Joe is dressed like, is it a hipster? Describe the fit.
Okay, I like to live at the intersection of the hipsters and like the business bros. Like, I don't want to be cool. I want to be like cool adjacent. And that's how I describe Greenpoint, my neighborhood in Brooklyn, because it's like kind of already over. Like, it's too expensive to be cool, but it's like cool people are near there and they like come to like, work in the coffee shop and you're like, whatever. Like, you can kind of see the kids in the baggy clothes, but I'm like, I worked really hard for these biceps, so I'm still wearing like tight shirts. Like, I'm not getting on that Billie Eilish sartorial trend. But today I look like a Brooklyn tech bro imitating a Northwest tech bro because I got my Carhartt hat, which is really for like naturey people, but like hipsters have appropriated it, and then a sweatshirt.
You look good. You look different.
Dan is another generation of bald tech bro. Dan is like, he's got more like the like zip up type vibe. Like very clean looking, like Dan's been in boardrooms, that looking at Dan.
I appreciate that. But when I started in ad tech, I had like a huge head of hair, like down to my waist, and just like the craziness of ad tech, and just all went away.
Okay, well, that's where we differ because I lost mine when I was like 18 to 22. So I came in.
Yeah, I did.
All right.
I came in hot.
Dan is Dan Rosenberg, the founder and CEO of Octane11. A friend, a portfolio founder of Aperium, and Dan is here to talk about a bunch of stuff, but specific to the topic that is near and dear to our hearts and the subject of this podcast, B2B marketing. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. I love talking about B2B marketing. I love to talk about B2B measurement.
As do we, Dan. As do we. Yeah. So why don't you tell us about, before you started Octane11, you were chief marketing and strategy officer at MediaMath. So you were a sort of practitioner of B2B marketing, in addition to obviously working on ad tech and martech. So why don't you tell us about that and sort of the problems you may have experienced at that time or the opportunities you saw that led you to Octane11?
Yeah, first off, Octane11, we provide all the multi-channel measurement specifically for B2B and specifically for agencies and large enterprises. And measurement's the #1 issue. The poll that came out in Q4 from eMarketer, 47% of respondents said that was their #1 area for investment in the coming year. More than AI, more than CTV. Almost double. So like measurement's like a big issue. You saw that like Ad Tech God poll too. Like, what's going to be the biggest issue in 10 years? The #1 was measurement. The next one was fraud, but like distant second, and AI was even way below that. So it's like, John Wren, like we're in the outcomes era. Like this is it. Like this is the moment. It's a huge, huge issue. So we focus on solving that specifically for B2B and specifically for multi-channel. And when I say multi-channel, I mean paid, owned, and earned. So like ads on the open web, ads in walled gardens, paid social, organic social, CTV, video, audio. All that kind of stuff that we talk about all the time in ad tech, but it's also MarTech and everything else: email, website, webinars, live events, content syndication, direct mail. Our clients are using 22 different tools on average. So we take all that data, we match it to target accounts, which is like the bread and butter for B2B. And then we tie all that to the sales CRM, which is basically the shopping cart for B2B, just to get that full customer journey. And so our clients are using that to get a handle on what's working, where they should be dialing back, where they should be having up. They save time, they get more leads, they help sales and marketing play nice together, and they just avoid a ton of costs. So anyway, that's kind of a little background on what we're onto. But like, how did I get to this? I got this because I was the chief strategy officer at MediaMath. And one thing we always talked about at MediaMath was measurable impact. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but like one of the main mantras was outcomes, transparency, and control. Like that was always it. But along the way in my role there, basically I had three big ahas. The first one is that everybody wants to connect the dots across paid, owned, and earned. It's getting harder to do in B2C because of the fragmentation of media, all the different formats, walled gardens, and the rise of GDPR and CCPA. But in B2B, it doesn't matter because I don't need to know it's Eric on every screen. I just need to know it's someone who's affiliated with a company. And if I know that, it's actually knowable on all those different formats and all those different screens and all those different settings. Like I can match it, like an activity on email or on social or on an ad or at an event, on a webinar to a company. And then I can attach that to the sales CRM. Like that's the shopping cart. So that was like our first kind of insight is like, how do you attach, across the board? The second thing was what's going to matter in the rise of AI. I actually wrote an article. You can Google it. HBR, Dan Rosenberg, AI. Like I wrote an article about AI and marketing. And the whole thesis was that it's going to become a commodity. And what's going to really matter is getting the data house in order, connecting the data, making sure it's clean, making sure it's enriched, making sure it's privacy compliant. And that's exactly how it's playing out. I mean, I already thought that we were going to be there on the low cost of data with OpenAI and Perplexity, but then DeepSync, we got another leg down in data costs.
Let me ask you a question about getting the data house in order. Also, I told you guys he was a professional, and notice I asked a question about MediaMath and he immediately gave like the whole lowdown of the company and the whole thing. So this man is big.
I gotta give some context.
This man is freaking hustling. You said get the data house in order. So this makes me think like this is a very complex problem, right? Like obviously like companies like LiveRamp, they also talk about that and have built like pretty large, multi-billion-dollar businesses on the back of solving those kinds of problems. So presumably Octane11, like if you're dealing with, let's say IBM, like a big B2B advertiser, are you sort of solving that data problem in one place? Or is that like a whole chain of like companies that are involved in putting that like data puzzle together so that they can then understand their marketing across channels?
That's a great question. Two things that come up. Number one is there's obviously great tools out there, data warehouses, ETLs, data visualization, all kinds of great tools, CDPs, DMPs, XXPs, whatever you got. But they're all basically like a blank canvas for you to build whatever you want. I mean, they're tools for data teams to like build their dream. And that's great. But that also means that whatever you build takes a really long time. You got to decide what you're going to build, how you're going to build it, all the ingredients. There's back and forth. I mean, a global company, forget about it. Decide what you're going to build, then build it, procuring of the tools, doing the building, then how do you use it, then the maintenance. That could be multiple years. For Fortune 100s, I mean, that it's literally multiple years. We come at it from a slightly different approach. Like we bring a purpose-built solution just for B2B. It's very prescriptive. It's like, this is our data model. Plug your tools into our data model and it's much faster. Everything just works. And like the visualizations just flow. Now, you're not going to get like 100% of everything that you could ever dream of, but it's like a Pareto rule. You're going to get 80% of what you're dying to get super fast. It's like a 90-10. And then sure, like do the rest of your, ad hoc analyses like on your own in those tools. But we plug into all those tools. It's one of the things that I love about this. And one of the things that I did at MediaMath too was I oversaw an initiative at MediaMath called MediaMath Open, which was MediaMath's like expansion into like hundreds and hundreds of partners across data and tech and visualization, analytics and all that, like all plugged into the MediaMath platform. And I love that. Like you're creating that ecosystem and value across all the participants. So like, that's what we're doing here too. Like all these different platforms plug into Octane11. It helps them do their job better, helps their products look better. So that's like the third pillar of it. So I would say like for the insights, like one of them was around like B2B connecting the dots. Number two was like AI is going to be super valuable, but low cost. So you got to get the data in order. And then the third one is the standardization. The standardization is like a huge unlock because it makes it easy to set up and it helps you work with the ecosystem. But also, by the way, like all the data across all of our clients, because it's all the same, like we have incredible benchmarking across our client base, which gives you context. And that gets better and better as we expand. And so that's a really exciting component too.
So you sit on top of all of these data providers or insights companies they might be partnering with, and then you specifically solve the B2B use case. So it's sort of pulling it all together and then specifically understanding how it works for B2B. Would that be an accurate way to describe it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we're working with B2B data providers and all of the media and paid owned and earned tools. I would say another like big area of where the partners come in is agencies. Like this is an amazing tool for agencies because this is helping them to like have state of the art analytics and visualizations at super low cost. Every new client that they turn on, they just plug it in and it works. They don't need to have investment in a huge data team, building something, maintaining it. Like they just plug into us and it just works. And so we love that because it frees up the agency to do the things that they love, like be creative, like bring the newest, coolest new tools to their clients. It helps them to spend more time thinking about strategy. It helps them also to get visibility across all the different tools that the clients are using. So it puts them more in a position of like an AOR. And that's a great place to be as an agency. So we love that as a channel.
We talk a lot about, from a marketing perspective, earned and owned on this pod. How do you measure earned and owned? I think that's an interesting thing because it's something that I think a lot of B2B leaders sometimes struggle with. Like, how do they measure? How do they assign value to it? Dig into that.
So as a starting point, from a data perspective, it's the same as any of the other channels. So like owned, like your website, the email, chatbots, webinars, live events, direct mail, like all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And
like a LinkedIn post.
LinkedIn post. Yeah. Your LinkedIn, that's your social, maybe it's boosted, wherever that is, like any of that data you can bring in and map onto it an account signal, knowing like which account a person is affiliated with, which company they're affiliated with. That just helps you to plug that into that whole customer journey all the way into the shopping cart. And that's what we do. Like that's our IP is ingesting all that data and then doing that overlay and plugging it in. We also happen to, by the way, aggregate everything at a campaign level. So when we're thinking multi-channel, like there are campaigns that are 3 social posts and 2 emails and a white paper and a landing page and maybe a webinar. Get to see all that at a campaign level. But once that data is all in, then you can start to see how does that map to the customer journey all the way through to the sale. So here's like kind of a fun example. Like we got one client, they're using Sendoso as their partner for sending out cheese boards to prospects, cheese boards. And if you take the meeting, you get a cheese knife, a matching cheese knife. And like that actually brought a lot of prospects to a conversation with the sales rep. And we have that data and it's plugged right into the customer journey. So when you look to see like, here's the journey for that client, like here's the ads that they ran on DV360 and on Yahoo and the emails they ran and the social posts they engaged with. And they came to the website and they downloaded the white paper. There's the cheese board. And then they had the meeting and then they turn into pipeline and then they turn into revenue and then add all that stuff up. Like there's your return on ad spend.
And then this customer basically turned on the jets when it came to like, I'm not trying to be funny, like just cheese board led marketing.
Yeah. I mean, just like that's a great like proof point of how does this work?
Yeah.
Not just on an island, like how does like sending a gift work, but how does it like work together with all the other things that we're doing?
Have you seen any other examples where the mix radically shifted based on, the insights that they got from Octane11, like paid media going down, paid media going up, doubling down on earned because it's just like so much better for informing a customer of, like a very difficult to understand thing?
Yeah. I mean, like that's a good example. There's always examples of like, this is a particular tactic that worked really well. Like here's another example, like Google discovery ads. Like it's a pretty specific format. It's like it's a pre-roll on YouTube. And like, it was just like doing super well. Like a new format. It's underutilized. Like not a lot of people know about it. Doing super well. Like, hey, let's see how that's like fitting into like customers that actually turn into a real pipeline and real revenue. Like let's go heavy up on that one. That was a huge one.
I used to sort of be more polemical about the issue of marketing measurement because I think that especially in startups, but not exclusively, people sometimes focus too much on measurement and not enough on just like doing the thing. Like they get so concerned about measuring the thing that they haven't even done it. And I'm not talking about obviously like a big advertiser that's already spending like tens of millions or hundreds of millions on advertising. I'm talking to an executive team and I'm like, it would be really good if you ever posted on LinkedIn. And they're like, but how are we going to measure it? And I'm like, let's get started and then we'll focus on how we're going to measure it. Because often the conversation about measuring precludes them from ever getting started in the first place. But I think, Dan, that something you said is really important and I can get on board with this. You said like Pareto principle. It's like 80% of it will be measurable, let's say, and that will then give you a really good foundation and an understanding of what works on which to build and on which to optimize your activities. I think that's so critical because it's like, it's not 100% measurable marketing. Like there are going to be things you're going to miss just by virtue of the way people interact with technology. So it's like earlier this week, there was the DeepSeek thing. It'll be 2 weeks ago when people hear this. I work with Brian at Scope 3. I email Brian. I'm like, you should weigh in on this. Like as someone working at the intersection of ad tech and AI, here are a few things to think about, whatever. Brian posts something, it gets like 500 reactions, like, 50,000 impressions or whatever. Now, 500 people reacted. So those people presumably should be able to be picked up by a tool like yours, but it reached like 30,000 people. And it's like, now, obviously also most of those people are irrelevant. Most of them won't be in Brian's target audience or whatever, but there also will be people who are and who just aren't captured because they don't like it or whatever, or they don't comment. And I think like there's often a polemical conversation about marketing, like, is it measurable or is it not? The reality is like, it's 80% measurable, or like whatever. It's some percent measurable. You can get a decent view of like who's reacting to this, and then you can tie them to the sales opportunities. And then that makes the CMO happy because they can go to Brian and be like, look, our marketing activities are having an impact on pipeline and revenue. But it's just understanding that middle ground that allows us to measure intelligently and not avoid doing anything that can't be 100% measured.
Totally agree. I mean, there are companies, marketing teams that just go down a rabbit hole trying to get to 100%. You're right. You can never get there and you can just spiral and just waste a ton of time. And so you got to kind of calibrate to like, where's the point where it's just turtles the rest of the way down? I can live with that and I can have a good enough view to make decisions. And I think that's a huge issue for CMOs in general. Like you have CMOs that say, I got to get the measurement and they just get all the way down and they never get outside into the world to like share the message. And then you've got CMOs who are like, you know what? It's not possible. So I'm just going to like not worry about measuring. I'm going to go only out in the world. But then they get unanchored from reality. And so like you got to find someplace in between. And that Pareto 80-20, I think is good. I think, north of 50, north of a coin flip, coin flip is really good. So yeah, so I love that one. The other thing I'll just say, like more and more of the signals will come into frame to be measurable. And, that's something that we're working on because we're thinking about, get as close as we can to 100%. As an example, like that Scope 3 example, like, yes, any kind of clicks, likes, shares, comments, we can capture that, map it to a company and show that, which is amazing. But for anyone who views it, you may not get the view through, but there is a concept of like dark social that people talk about, which is like, where did you hear about us? So like maybe in a lead capture form, where did you hear about this? Where you can kind of type in an answer and maybe it snaps to like one of like 10 options and you can capture that and map that into the customer journey. So we do have customers that do that and we're going to get better about that. But our thesis is that like you can measure as much as possible and get it mapped in here. And we're just going to keep grinding away at that.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
Let's go.
What are the challenges in selling a product like this? Because it is so compelling. It does, kind of seem to answer so many questions for B2B marketers, just because the context for why I ask, we have like 1/3 of the pod's listener base are like founders and CEOs. So everything applies. I think like 1/3 of marketers, 1/3 are sellers. So like give the sellers some love.
Yeah. It's a new approach to an old and really challenging problem. And it's sensitive. Like we're dealing with very sensitive data and the stakes are high. This is like you're making the move onto a new measurement platform that's going to measure your job as a CMO or an agency or a CRO where, this is critical to what you do. So just getting clients to, yes, there's an awareness, but like, I'm going to try it out. And on the data side, I feel like we've kind of gone through that. Like we do the SOC 2 compliance with EY, and like we've gone through data reviews. I mean, we're supporting 2 Fortune 100 companies. I mean, we've gone through some serious data reviews, but just getting over that first hurdle is a big one. And I think as we get people learn more about this, that this is an option, we'll just be having more conversations and getting more clients converted over. It's one of the reasons why we love working with agencies is the agencies already have a trusted relationship with these very big B2B customers. And so we're just kind of entering the conversation as a partner with them. And that just helps advance the conversation, gets it going super fast, which is great. But it's great for the agencies because like they're saving time. They're helping to bring their customers like a great view into everything that they're doing. And it's saving them cost on doing, endless data work. So it's kind of a win-win. Like one of our agency clients was telling us like every time we get on the call with this client, this advertiser client, like we spend half the meeting arguing about the data. And it's like very kind of adversarial. It's like with Octane11 in there, we just start at a place where we're all looking at the same data. We all agree. And so like we're spending time like talking about strategy, talking about creative, talking about this new cool thing we wanted to try. And that just like really advances it. So we love that. And that's really one thing that we found is like really helping us to get over that hump of like, let's give this a shot.
Let's drill down deeper into the real nature of the objection. Because I think like it can be an awareness problem. It can be a differentiation problem. It can be an urgency problem. My guess would be with this kind of product, like at its heart, it's a differentiation problem, and not that there are other companies that are doing exactly what you're doing, but if I'm that agency person, right? Or if I'm a brand CMO, I have a bunch of different tools that on some level are telling me they can give me insight into this stuff, right? Again, data, measurement tools, whatever. If you're an agency like Publicis, for example, their whole shtick is premised on Epsilon and they know where everyone is and they can see all the interactions and whatever. So then how do you sell to Publicis or how do you sell to Omnicom, which as you mentioned, CEO John Wren said last year, it's all measurable now. They're claiming they can already do that. So then why do they need you?
Yeah. I mean, this has been a problem since the beginning. I mean, from the very beginning of like, I know 50% of my marketing works. I just don't know which half. So it's always been a problem. And so, of course, there's lots of tools. And of course, there's lots of conversation around, how do we solve this challenge? So, we're just relatively early days as a company. And we're just kind of knocking down case studies and use cases and getting that, those examples out there and building those relationships with agencies that are saying, hey, I've tried this. It works. I'm happy to brought you to one client or 2 clients, and now I'm going to bring you to 10, or now I'm going to bring you to 20. And so that's kind of the phase we're in, which is an exciting phase to be in. We've got about a dozen agencies using the platform, and we've grown, we've like tripled in 2024. So like we're kind of on our way. But you're right, that is the big challenge to kind of break through that. I think for us, it's like through building that kind of trust, the initial test, working with partners, kind of the formula.
Well, and the fact that, a dozen agencies are using it, Dan, would be a sign that there is some sort of gap that they themselves are seeing that you're filling. I think it's just like, I imagine the challenge from a sales perspective is sort of articulating that gap and getting them to understand like whatever you have isn't enough. And I just say this having worked with like other execs who are founders who are working in this sort of data and measurement space. And I know that's a challenge they face is it's always like there are 30 freaking companies that are trying to sell their target this measurement product. So it's a challenge to convince them that you have this sort of unique view or value add that's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Do you consider it a SaaS product? And whether that's true or not, what are you thinking about in terms of the way users interacting with the product might change as we shift from sort of a SaaS, make software easy paradigm to an AI agentic, like have the thing do it for you paradigm?
It's both a SaaS product and an AI product. So, I mean, it's software as a service. It's not like a services people product. It's you log in, like once you're set up, you log in and like you're getting data on a self-service, 24/7. So it's certainly that. From an AI perspective, going back to, what I'd written and kind of was seeing coming down the line in terms of like AI is going to be everywhere. It's going to be like electricity or water, super low cost. Like the first step for us was getting that data all in place across all the channels. And that's kind of a big hurdle. And so we now have that. And so now, sure enough, we're rolling out your Gen AI chatbot. Like here's a, type that, not just the visualizations that we've created that makes sense for multi-channel B2B, but also like ask a question, type in a question. So we're just rolling that out, but it'll be that where you ask a question. It'll also be, let's have the AI just in the background, always looking through and trying to find issues and recommendations to serve up to you that may be interesting. Another really cool area is creative images. So APIs can read images. Like we're capturing images from ads, from social posts, from emails, and like understanding them, and they're matched up to marketing performance all the way through to revenue. So like, what are the images that are working in this industry sector and are really driving revenue? Like what are the commonalities that they have within the image? Like that's all knowable, and the AI can do that. So we prepared the data. That one's going to roll out. MMM is another obviously great one too. Like Meta's got Robin. Google just made public Meridian as their answer to Meta's Robin, and like it's open source. So plug in your data, like you're going to get answers like what's driving the increase in performance, and then what should you do more of. But that's more is going to be really exciting. So yeah,
Dan, you're intense, buddy. It's always hard to keep up with you. Let's shift around. Let's talk about some other stuff. Why is B2B such an underserved market?
It's super fragmented. I think that's the challenge. It's like, I can't buy an ad on the Super Bowl. Most B2B companies, I mean, maybe Accenture can, but like most companies can't buy these huge swaths of media. And that means, by the way, that like all the service providers that make money on huge swaths of media are just like, we're not going to bother with that. Yeah, because not everybody.
Each fragmented piece is further fragmented as too small.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to explain, like not everyone's on the market for your like $300,000 server blades. Like, you think that's not, you can't put that on a Super Bowl commercial. Like you got to be super targeted and find like there's maybe like 10,000 buyers for my particular B2B product. So I got to find them in media, in social, email, events, like all the different ways to find them in small little bits and then aggregate that together. So it's harder. It's a lot harder. It's harder to execute. It's harder to aggregate and manage, but it's really big. I mean, 20% of all marketing is B2B. You know what percent of all marketing is retail marketing? 15%. So we're talking a lot about retail media in the world, but it's 15%. It's smaller than B2B.
If my inbox is a representative sample of, just like, startup innovation around use cases, I can count on one hand yearly the number of B2B startups, like B2B focused. Yeah. They're all B2B, right? Yeah. But like, attacking this market, it's so interesting, but that makes sense. When did you start Octane11? Was it 2018 or 2019?
We started it. So I was the chief strategy officer and CMO at MediaMath. And so one of the cool things that I was able to be the customer at MediaMath. Like I used all the tools and I did, I felt all the feels of the challenges. And so we started to craft the product there, but really started for real, like probably at the beginning of 2020, like right before the pandemic, where we said, okay, we're going to really separate out and just go in 100% with a few people from MediaMath, a few people who were like B2B practitioners who felt the problem and said, hey, we could try to solve this.
So 5 years later now, what surprised you the most about being a founder?
About being a founder? Well, I mean, it's been a really interesting time because, think about what we've gone through. Like 2020, the first half, it was like, where's the world going? And then all of a sudden, there was fuel on the fire and everything went crazy. 2021 was an incredible founding year for funding, and then all of a sudden, Ukraine invasion Q1 like 22, and then everything started kind of grinding to a halt. I mean, a lot of particularly in B2B, I think it was pretty hard hit because in the marketing world, because had been so much investment in like all those B2B sellers and SDRs and events. And And well, the events, and then the events turned to like your inbox getting just like hammered. And so I think there was a lot of like fatigue from buyers and uncertainty about budgets. So I think we went through a period of like 23 into 24 of like a real kind of like freeze up. So that was kind of macro environment. You had cookie deprecation, that whole conversation. We also, which is a little bit idiosyncratic to us, like coming out of MediaMath, like we built the first version of our tech on the MediaMath infrastructure. So I was listening to your pod with Mike Houtman recently, and he was talking about like those last, days when MediaMath hit the pause button. So we kind of got caught in that one too. And so we did a big kind of shift. So, that really, that's the story through 2023. And then this 2024 was a year where we just like product was there, market's coming back, and like partners in place. And so like we've just been growing super fast. So what did I learn about that? Like there's a lot of bumps in the road. You hear this, it's not a straight line, it's a winding road, but like to start with your first, premise a couple minutes ago, like it's a big opportunity and we're just kind of totally locked in on it. So, we're going to do what we can to get there and deliver the solution.
So Dan, as the company has grown, you've probably made a lot of hires and like hired and interviewed a lot of people in your day. Sometimes when we have founders on, we ask for like hiring advice or things you think most people get wrong about hiring, like unusual questions you like to ask. Is there anything like that? Like any sort of counter consensus experiences or takes you have on hiring?
One of the things that I love to do, this isn't always available to you, but is it possible to work with someone for a little bit, even on a part-time basis? And this has become possible in a world where like the job markets are like in a state of flux, where you can, have people come in as an advisor. Actually, like when I joined MediaMath, I was working on like 4 different projects and MediaMath was one of them. And I got to see, like, they got to know me. I got to see like, wow, this thing's like really taking off. It's an amazing thing to do if you can, because in the traditional interviewing environment, like you meet someone for like 30 minutes or 1 hour at a time. And maybe you got, best practice, have a meal with them. Not as easy to do in a remote environment. And that's where we are. I can talk about that, but just the ability, like to spend a week, someone's at like all your team meetings and hearing all the things, like the ups and downs of all the things that you're working on, like that's tremendous. And that you get to see how they work in that environment. I love that if it's possible. And by the way, people that I talk to who are on the market looking for jobs, I'm always like, pick up a couple of consulting type jobs and you don't need to build a consulting firm, but like work with a couple different companies. Like you're going to learn a ton. And that's a big decision to make. It doesn't need to be 100% binary.
It's so hard to tell immediately whether it's a good fit for both parties. Like, obviously as the owner of a smallish consultancy, like, I work with like a dozen people at any one time. And it's like, you don't really know in the first, like in the sales process or in the first week, like which ones are going to be fantastic and which ones are going to be kind of okay and so on, like you need the time of collaborating with that person, working on some problems to figure out like how you gel, what their strengths are, what the vulnerabilities are, and so on. So totally agree. Sure. And I think that is a huge asset of the remote work paradigm is that, yeah, people aren't just exclusively in one place anymore. And a lot of people are doing consulting and so on. So you get the opportunity to maybe work with someone for a month part-time before hiring them full-time. I think it's great advice.
It's huge. It's huge. Just about the remote work thing. So we're about 1/3 New York, 1/3 other parts of the US, and 1/3 in Spain. And we've been remote like that since 2020, since we kind of said we're going to start hiring remotely, and it's been amazing. I think we're operating at a very high level across there. We're Zoom, Slack, like we have our like norms of how we do that, and it's great. I mean, one of our little tidbits, like every Monday morning, we do like a top to bottom, like here's everything going on in the business. Everybody's on, but we always start the meeting with send in optionally pictures from your weekend. And people are sending in pictures like with their family or their, where the trip they just went on or like their meal with their friend and it's awesome because you get to at some level, like you get to know people more that way than we used to when we were just in the office 9 to 9, not 9 to 5, 9, 9, 9 to 9. So I love that. And our team has been great. I don't know if we didn't get every hire right, but like the team that we have in place now, just love every single person. They're amazing.
So the Octane11 RTO mandate email hasn't gotten out yet.
Yeah, we haven't done it. I don't know. I mean, this next level. So like we're about 20 people right now. We're growing very fast. Like I said, like we tripled in our revenue last year. We're going to raise another round of venture capital, and that's just going to be all around expansion. And I think it'll be interesting to see, like, that also means hiring a lot more people, and we'll see where people end up being. But we're at the moment where I think we're operating at a very high level, remote first.
So speaking of remote work and community and all that stuff, Eric and I are big fans of Sam Part's podcast, My First Million. And Sam obviously started a sort of business community company called Hampton that gets together founders and CEOs, talk about shared problems and experiences and such. And I saw on your LinkedIn that you are involved in that. Give us the inside scoop.
I mean, Sam's great. I mean, I got to know Sam and Joe Spicer because they actually invested in Octane11 and an angel round through an SPV that Eric actually introduced me to those guys. So thank you for that. So it goes back to that. So that was before the Hampton community was launched. It was called Hampton VC. It's an angel list group, but I joined up right away when they started the community, and it's been great. Like you get into a core group where you meet once a month with 8 or so similarly situated CEO founders with a moderator and talk about founder life, talk about personal life. The moderators are great. I had a great moderator, Angela Parker. She was awesome. But I just recently changed groups because we kind of mixed it up. So that's a huge part of it. But there's also a Slack with like 1,000 people on it. And it's super well curated and managed. And you can ask any question you want and get incredible answers about really wild things. Like whether it's like,
what's the wildest?
I mean, like in inheritance tax to like testosterone treatment. Like there's just like a whole range. Like, yeah, like health biohacking to personal finance to business and marketing. I mean, there's always something going on. And there's Slack, there's your community group, there's events. I just had an event that I went to in the city where Sam interviewed Kevin Ryan from AliCorp. Sam's a great interviewer. I mean, Kevin has an incredible story. And I was like writing furiously at like notes of some pearls of wisdom. So I think it's been great. I think Hampton's been very cool.
Nice. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm curious about this Slack, but I guess I'll never have access because I'm not a member. Send me some of the wild ones.
Absolutely, without violating the terms and conditions.
No news.
Yeah, just take screenshots of this private exclusive group. Dan, thank you so much for coming on. This was fun. Thanks for talking through the company and, opportunities, challenges, etc. We love to have founders on, do a little friendly grilling. So appreciate you taking us inside.
Yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah, Dan, where can people find you on the internet if they want to reach out?
I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can definitely find me there. Obviously, like Octane11.com, you can find me there too. But we also have a podcast, 11 Minutes with Octane11. Super fast, even faster if you go 2x speed.
Oh,
we're talking about B2B measurement. So very exciting. But it's also, we're just kicking off actually a new season. We started a little over a year ago. We've had some great guests, and so we've got a bunch more that are coming out really soon. So definitely recommend people check that out.
Awesome, Dan. Appreciate you, man. Thank you for the time. Joe, always a pleasure. And we will see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.